the benefactor of all this geopolitical tension is going to be the consumer in Australia.
Now, Donald Trump was asked what this will mean for Tesla. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
It could be a net neutral, or they may be good. He has a big plant in Texas. He has a big plant in California. And anybody that has plants in the United States, it's going to be good for, in my opinion.
But Steve, of course, Tesla has been facing plummeting sales in Europe, in the US, and here in Australia. How is that going to affect, or has it been affecting our EV take-up?
Well, we've had a small impact in the near term for EV take-up because of the Tesla sales slump. But I think in the medium to long term, the Chinese brands bringing in EVs, as well as the traditional OEMs and their product coming online, will make up that gap.
And we'll get to the Chinese dominance in that space in Australia in a second, but just a bit more broadly, how will these tariffs work? Because there's car parts and there's cars. It's going to be hard to police, isn't it?
Yeah, very difficult. It'll impact the supply chain, I think, massively. I think it'll slow down production for a period until all the brands and all the factories get their supply chains in order. So I think short term there'll be impacts to production and vehicle availability.
Well, China's BYD has overtaken Tesla in this EV race, momentarily at least, particularly when it comes to deliveries and sales. Why has it been so successful?
They've really focused on innovative product and having the tech right, and they've done that very cost effectively. So they're very competitively priced compared to other EVs in the market. And they've done that by dominating the supply chain from the start to finish, from mineral extraction to battery production to producing the vehicle and even shipping the vehicle to the markets in which they compete in. Australia, one of them. They actually own their own car carrier boats, so they've got a fleet of them. So there's no other brand that has that.
And we saw during COVID when the traditional car makers were really thrown into chaos because the bits of the supply chain are all over the world.
That's correct. So I think with any disruption to the supply chain, depending on what it is, it could be a small part that probably isn't known or wouldn't be saw as something that would impact production. But if you're missing a part, you obviously can't produce the vehicle in its completion.
Yeah, so BYD's insulated itself from that, and it's recently flagged a 5-minute charging station. What's the viability of this? Is it going to be a game changer?
Well, I would believe if they could do that, a 5-minute charge would be very compelling. One of the main issues with EVs as a consumer is understanding whether or not you can charge, or if you haven't charged, because I'm forgetful like most people, you might forget to plug the car in overnight. So a 5-minute charge would be fantastic, would be very compelling for EV adoption. But unfortunately, I believe in Australia that's a long way off. I think if someone was charging their car in 5 minutes, the amount of power to the grid and the grid itself really can't handle it, and it's quite expensive and a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built. So based on our long history of infrastructure build, I think we've got a long way to go.
Is it scaring other car manufacturers though?
I don't believe so, because I think most consumers would be pretty okay with 20-30 minutes, potentially a little bit less in that 10 to 20 minute range. So I think everyone's trying to get that car charging time down as much as possible, because that does make the proposition of owning an EV a lot easier. But I don't think it would scare them, but I think it obviously would be a big advantage if you could do it.
Well, BYD now has the 6th top selling car in Australia, the hybrid Shark. Chinese car makers are really filling the gap here when it comes to EVs.
They certainly are, and we have to remember that China's market is so much bigger than Australia. So China sells over 30 million cars a year, and they're producing a lot more cars than they have just for the domestic market. They're also the very largest exporter of vehicles globally. They export 6 million cars. So they definitely have enough product to satisfy global demand. They actually have 100% production for all of EV demand globally, and 50% of all vehicles demand globally as well. So we're going to see a lot more Chinese product in the Australian market. Currently, it's just below 20%. I think that'll get up to around the 40 to 50% over time. And it's because it's a very compelling product. It's very competitively priced. So yeah, I think we will see a lot of Chinese brands and a lot of uptake of Chinese vehicles in Australia.
When we look at Tesla, it actually manufactures in China. What's happening in the Chinese factories?
Well, we're seeing, and I've read that Tesla's having issues with storage of software and getting some of their data in and out of the Chinese market and their production facilities, and that's due to geopolitical issues. So it seems, and I did read, I think you had mentioned that in China that the sales have dropped almost 40% just in February. So we are seeing a massive drop in production and sales in China for Tesla. Again, that'll probably compel them to send more cars to Australia. So I think ultimately the benefactor of all this geopolitical tension is going to be the consumer in Australia. We're a very attractive market. We're a small market. We're 1.2 million new cars a year. But we're a very attractive market. We're a profitable market for the car brands.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of our market being quite small, it's also quite saturated. Mm-hmm. What does it mean for the traditional car makers? And I say traditional because we've traditionally had Japanese, Korean, US, European car brands in Australia.
It's sort of the next step in the evolution, I see. Most of the traditional brands are going to need to do a pivot. They're going to have to look at the market and where they fit. So when things change, you have to change your business. So you're looking at most of the traditional brands that are existing in Australia. You're going to have to look at where the Chinese are coming in, where they compete, where they cannot compete. And in my view, we're going to see a lot of the national sales companies become all the national sales companies becoming an independent distributor, which means they're going to have several brands represented by the one distributor.
So what happens to dealership groups then?
Not much would really happen to dealership groups because they're going to sell the cars, they're going to service the cars, they're going to maintain their relationships with the customers. They'll just have a different distribution partner. They'll have a different OEM partner when it comes to selling. Interestingly, Australian dealers are taking a more partnership view with the Chinese product and Chinese brands coming in, whereas it's very combative, as you can tell through all the US news coming out. So it's a much different proposition for Australia.
And what is the view about the quality of the Chinese-made vehicles versus the European or Japanese-made cars? Toyota is typically seen as a very quality vehicle. Are we seeing concerns about the Chinese-made vehicles?
We had in the past, and if you go back a decade or 2 decades ago when the first Chinese brands first came to Australia, there's a lot of quality concerns. Those have gotten a lot better, and the product coming from China is getting a lot better. So you're seeing product that is actually pretty competitive from a quality point of view, as well as very competitive at a price point of view. So I do still think we're going to have our traditional brands that will have plenty of market share in Australia. You mentioned Toyota. I think Toyota's in a safe position. It's the other fringe sort of, because as you mentioned, it's a very competitive market. We've got 55 car brands, passenger car brands for a 1.2 million market. America, for example, 16 million cars they sell, same amount of brands. So when we start bringing in more and more brands to add to that mix, we're probably the most competitive market in the world when it comes to car sales. So it's definitely going to change the entire landscape.
Now, the opposition today has flagged plans to cut the fuel excise in half and also scale back emissions restrictions. They don't sound like they're very pro-EV policies.
I can't speak for the government, but I think the cut in fuel excise tax is a good thing, at least in the short term. That'll have a better impact to household wallets and as also maybe consumer prices on goods and services. From an EV adoption point of view, a sensible compromise, in my view, is to extend the adoption timeline and maybe not try to go all the way to zero. If you can get 90% to zero is a very good result, and then work out that last 10%, sometime down the road. I think importantly, trying to go from 0 to 100 very quickly in car terms, you talk 0 to 100 kilometers an hour. It's sometimes going the quickest isn't always the best, and I think some compromise and some sensibility from an economic point of view makes a lot more sense.
Well, final question there. Where are we in terms of that EV timeline? Like, how much have we got through? Where are we when it comes to uptake of EVs in Australia?
I think we're currently just around 10% uptake, and that's sort of gone up and down. It might be a little bit less than 10%. I don't know the number exactly off the top of my head. We are currently in the first year of NVES, the new vehicle emissions scheme. So the penalties for non-compliance do not start to really bite until 2027. So the good thing is there's a review built into the legislation in 2026 So I think we're going to see some compromises come from both sides. And ultimately, that's a good thing, because there needs to be a bit of compromise in this whole situation.
Steve Bragg, thank you so much.
Thank you.